Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C talking real sports as we do every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide. Welcome to the $1 Million Show. And I also want to thank all of our listeners in Latin America. So bienvenidos to you. I'm actually learning some Spanish, Big C. I want to thank you guys for listening in. Also London, England, Berlin, the great country of Canada, and of course the beautiful United States of America. And also, as we still are looking at what happened, Big C, and thanks again for calling in from the East Coast, and we talk about what's happening in sports, and more, everyone's paying homage to Muhammad Ali. He was indeed the greatest boxer of all time, but as we talk about Ali, he was more than just a boxer, and we're going to, of course, have some NBA basketball coming up. We have the College World Series for the women coming up. We have Oklahoma and Auburn, two good old girl teams from the South. But also, Big C, there's an incident at Stanford I want to touch on, too, and contrast that with what happened at Baylor when Art Riles lost his job because he did not know what was going on. But before we get into that, Big C, I just want to get your thoughts again as we're going to talk about Muhammad Ali all week and how he transitioned sports and he became such a figure that everyone could look to as an example. And Charles Barkley was talking about that today, Big C. Again, just what does Ali mean to you as a commentator and as an athlete, Big C? Go right ahead, sir.
You know, Charlton, Ali transcended a humanitarian.
Yeah.
Not a boxer, not a sports figure, but a world and American humanitarian who cared as much about others as he cared about himself. He stood up for the injustices of the poor, the downtrodden, Charlton.
Yeah.
And later on in his life, he stood up for those who were suffering with Parkinson's and inflictions like that and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
He brought that to the forefront of Americans' thoughts, Charlton, that you don't hide people away when they have scenarios like that.
Yeah.
Is that you embrace and you try to make their lives more comfortable. And that's what he fought for people. And that's the humanitarian part of Ali, Charlton.
Yeah.
We all will always remember and revere him as a great boxer. But his role that he played outside the ring was far greater than any fight he ever fought within the ring because he laid a precedence for the world, Charlton, on how people should treat people, regardless of the religion or creed, is that we are people of this earth. That's how he looked upon everybody. His trip to Mecca helped really open his eyes and make him see that.
Yeah.
But prior to that, his thoughts were more about people than what he could do about winning, Charlton.
Yeah, and I think about it, too, because today is June the 8th, 2016, and, Ali passed last Friday, and so many people were dealing with graduations and just other things that were going on. There was a fight down in Los Angeles with Uriah Faber, and so many of the MMA guys. I covered West Coast Championship fighting up here in Sacramento, which is MMA fighting. There's so many fighters, and now most of these guys in the MMA, they're Caucasian athletes. But they have so much respect for Muhammad Ali, who passed at 74, and they talk about him as if he was almost the reason they got into boxing, because Ali wasn't about any specific color. Of course, he was pro-black because society at the time was anti-black, and maybe now it still is in some parts. It's just not as much.
It still exists, Charles.
It's still there.
It's very prevalent depending on where you are.
Yeah.
I mean, racism will always rear its ugly head in America, and when people try to slide into, well, no, it doesn't exist. It doesn't, happen here in America. Look at the Republican presidential campaign. Candidate. If you want to talk about racism in America, look no further than Donald Trump, who personifies what racism is. This man hasn't touched on any political agendas, but he's just talking about ostracized certain ethnicities in America.
Yeah, I want to tell everybody they're going to get rich if they just vote for him. And ironically, when I listened to something that was very poignant, that a lot of people may not want to appreciate because we're all told to be nice and, don't say anything that's going to offend someone because you don't want people who don't like you to know that they're doing wrong, right? Basically, just keep it a secret. But
hey, what's wrong? I'm still trying to figure out what's right and wrong in life.
Exactly. So, ironically, we talk about ESPN being the worldwide leader in sports, and I've been watching it, I believe, since 1983 when they came onto the scene. And we have the NBA Finals tonight with the Golden State Warriors playing the Cleveland Cavaliers. And if Cleveland's going to get a game, it will be tonight. But I'm thinking I respect Charles Barkley for something that he said. Even though I did not respect him for always pulling for OKC against Golden State, but maybe people don't like me for pulling for Golden State.
Charles,
we're all homers, Big C, right?
Charles been known to make huge wages. It wasn't that he was betting with his heart; he was betting with his pocket. All right,
okay.
That's what Charlton was.
And we know that's considered to be a rumor in the Southeastern Conference. A lot of athletes bet on things, Big C, from what I understand, but I can't confirm or deny that. However, we talked about what happened to the lack of people standing up for something. We talked about the great Kobe Bryant. And I love Kobe Bryant as an athlete, but as an activist, here's a guy who was worth 50 times more than Muhammad Ali, but didn't do anything to help young black kids publicly. He may have done something privately, like giving tennis shoes. And maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope if I am wrong that people will correct me on it. But have you heard of any scholarships given out by some of the young, great multi-millionaire black athletes, or even the corporations that own them, like Jerry Buss when they gave Shaquille O'Neal $33 million? Was there anything set up for inner-city kids and even poor white kids? And I say that because of this, Big C. As the African-American athlete, we are more coveted when it's time for the vote, when people want to get voted or nominated, they want to become the next president or the next governor. They always find a way to visit the black community, and they march around with governors, and they march around with pastors. But once they get elected to office, do you see them really often in the black communities? No, you don't. Also, when athletes are good in high school, we know, especially in the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, who has their own TV network, they're always going around the black neighborhoods trying to find the next black stud. And I know people say you need an education, but we know it's exploitation. Charles Barkley is the only person outside of you that spoke out against that, Big C. I don't hear anyone talking about it. Just your comments on Charles Barkley, because he also came out of the Southeastern Conference down at Auburn, I believe, Big C.
Well, he did, Charlton, and he played with a great era of athletes down at the University of Auburn. But, you know, you have Charles Barkley on television, and he's a dynamic voice for the African-American and sports community.
Oh, I love him. I love his work.
When you look at the show that he was on this morning, you know, with the Talking Heads on ESPN, now those people have had a platform every day, 24 hours a day, to speak about what the injustices are, what sports need to do for the inner city, how they can help, how they can stem the tide of violence in the inner cities, Charlton. If you can give an athlete $200 million to wear your sneakers, how many sneakers can you buy for underprivileged children, Charlton, with $200 million? And that's not money out of your pocket. You're just donating product, Charlton, when you really look at that. And when Charles Barkley spoke, he spoke from the heart, because he grew up in rural Alabama, not having much as a young man, fortunate enough to get a scholarship to the University of Auburn and become an All-American basketball player, Charlton, leading them to the NCAA tournament for the first time in that school's history during his attendance. But he's taken his voice from a former college athlete to a professional athlete, and now a commentator on television, the TNT show, where it's his major platform. But Charles Barkley is an advocate for justice in America. Now, he'll speak about that he's rich. And he doesn't really boast about it, but he speaks about it. Yeah, he's rich, and not wealthy. He says that, you know, we need to help others out. And he has tried in many ways. When you look at the guys that he went to college with, all of those guys have given back into their communities. Frank Thomas, Bo Jackson, Lionel James, all of these guys were at Auburn together. And so they've been great activists as far as helping in Alabama, the state, as far as helping schools and underprivileged children. But we need more of a unilateral, you know, swatch of that from professional athletes as well as the owners and corporations. You know, and we're just not getting that.
Well, you know, Big C, ironically, we brought it up yesterday, and we were talking about that outside of Muhammad Ali, and I'm not trying to jump on wealthy black guys. Some guys don't have the capacity to talk about some things, and I'm not trying to be bourgeois either. But E.B. Du Bois talked about the talented 10th and how it just takes a few people to stand up for what's right. And that's how Dr. King was. That's what Muhammad Ali was. I think about when you look at the growth of the African-American athlete, after we had integration, there were so many universities that were not caring about creating an education for young black players and even poor white players. They wanted to exploit them into a college system of what's called free labor. Now, I look at someone like Malcolm X, who was pro-black race, and he went to Mega. He was also pro everyone, just pro equality. But I think about what Charles Barkley has done, because too many black men are afraid to say what I'm going to say right now. They're just so comfortable keeping that job. And Muhammad Ali spoke about that. And with the Charlton and Big C show, I want to make sure that we're not the sycophants reporter or sycophants broadcaster that just is happy to say, hey, boss, what do you want me to say next, boss? I just want to keep my job. And I remember sometimes growing up, sometimes people are called Uncle Toms if they're trying to go into mainstream media. Well, we're not Uncle Toms, we're educated men. But I want to bring this point up. Because if Charles Barkley can do what you talked about yesterday, and it's ironic, the day after you talked about it, here's Charles Barkley on ESPN, and I've been watching him for years. I never really heard him stand up for black people of color.
But Charlton, think about this.
Yes.
Think about this, Charlton. They brought Charles Barkley in to say that. Now, he works for another network, TNT, okay?
Yeah.
There was no one, and forgive my French, with the balls on ESPN to stand up and talk.
Yeah.
You know, Charles Barkley came in, a grown man, speaking the truth. ESPN has dozens and dozens of broadcasters, and even African-American broadcasters,
yeah.
But none of those individuals had the character or the content in their mind and heart to speak about the atrocities and injustice that go on in the sports and social world in America.
Yeah, and it's so true, because when we think about what Ali stood for, if he did not stand for equality and speaking his mind, see, anyone can be intelligent. I've met so many intelligent African-American men, but I notice the way society will say that a black man is smart. They'll say he has a great basketball IQ, as opposed to saying he's intelligent. They want to put it in a segment. And I'm not saying every Caucasian, but listen to it on TV. When they describe the black athlete, he has a great football IQ. He has a great basketball IQ. I don't hear them saying that about the white counterparts. Now, this is one thing I want to bring out also.
Well, Charlton, yes. To take that a little further, you never hear him talk about how cerebral the black athlete is.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll hear that tonight in the game, that he has a great basketball IQ.
Exactly.
But what is a great basketball IQ? I think that's anybody that's on a professional level.
It's like saying he's dumb.
A great basketball IQ.
It's a euphemistic way of saying he's dumb, but he can play great basketball. But that's just a fact. So I applaud Charles Barkley, and I wonder if anyone else has the stones to speak up. Because Muhammad Ali, he had those back and forth conversations with Howard Cosell, and they always pushed each other. But Ali always stood up for the young kid that did not have a voice, whether he's black or white. And speaking of having a voice, this segment is also sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealer, home of the all-new Escalade. You can only get it there brand new, the standard of the world. When you go down to test drive it, let them know that Charlton and Big C sent you. Now, Big C, something that I want to bring up, and this is a touching subject, because I know we want to celebrate NBA basketball, so we can say, oh my God, can't they get up and down the court fast? Can't Steph Curry shoot threes? Klay Thompson's amazing. Look at how strong we have a LeBron James. Isn't he one of the best basketball players ever? Now, this is a story for women, because we all know that women don't get the same respect in society. We know Hillary Clinton becoming the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, and a lot of people have a pushback because she's a woman. But I want to bring up something that had to do with Sharapova, who was also considered a world-class cheater in sports because she was caught doing something that she wasn't supposed to be doing, supposedly, allegedly. But when it comes to this heinous act that happened at Stanford, and I'm not going to mention the man's name because he's still a young man, but he was accused of raping a woman who was in a fraternity who was unconscious. The same garbage that we have going on against Bill Cosby, and I know it's just allegedly, but I'm not afraid to talk about it because I want women who are out there in those environments to feel safe. And when men in our position sit back and say nothing, then we actually make it more difficult for them. The judge gave this boy 6 months. Okay, Mike Tyson went to jail. He went to prison for a couple of years. For 3 years.
For 3 years.
But he's black. Bill Cosby being brought through the system, whether he did it or not, I don't know. But
in the mid-70s, Charles. In the mid-70s.
Yeah, 40 years ago, but he's an African-American.
Incidents that happened up to 40 years ago.
They're talking about a life in prison. Here's a white boy that was accused, not accused, but proven that he sexually molested a woman who was drunk.
All the DNA evidence was right there, Charlton.
And the judge, who happened to be Caucasian, gave him 6 months. Now, for anyone who believes that everything is equal in a society, and Muhammad Ali would have spoke out about this,
it's not equal. Let me tell you about the malfeasance of the judge's statement, okay?
Yeah.
The judge stated that for a 20-minute incident that occurred as an impropriety in this young man's life, that he should not be shackled the rest of his life as a sex offender. This judge, holding the highest seat that you can in California, said that a female's body or life did not matter.
Yeah. Only
this young man's future. They said her education was not as important as his education.
Yeah.
Not even a double standard, a triple standard, Charlton. That you're allowed to rape and ravish a woman's body and say, well, I had been drinking, she was unconscious, didn't know about the incident, so it was consensual. You know, I'm still waiting on the woman that's unconscious to say that a rape or molestation is consensual, Charlton.
Yeah, and see, it's so, if men don't say anything, and a lot of us don't, because we don't have the character. Muhammad Ali had character. He's even made me feel more emboldened to start speaking your mind, because someday it may be a woman that you love, and they're going to say, well, you didn't say anything when it happened to that person. What are you complaining about now? But
Charlton, at any point in Ali's life or career, we never heard about him having any incidents or run-ins with the police, even when they agitated and provoked him.
Yeah.
You never heard of any incident with this great man.
Well, see, that's something too, because, and I also want to appreciate Mike Golick, because he had a strong stance against what happened, because he went to Notre Dame and played NFL football, and he's on the Mike and Mike show, and I'm glad that they're men, but I heard you say it first, Big C. A lot of guys, they sit there quietly, and Muhammad Ali talked about this. People are comfortable. They're so comfortable they don't want to stand for anything other than the next shoe contract. And even guys like Michael Jordan, I love him as an athlete, but as an activist, he's wasted so much time where he could be an influence intellectually, but he just wants to sell more tennis shoes, and that's a shame. Just because you're rich, it doesn't mean you have a social conscience. And if you can't stand out and say something the way Muhammad Ali did because you got $1 billion, you don't want to ruffle the feathers. What does that mean when the next young black kid is accused of a crime? What does that mean when the next young black kid is accused of anything? Because this Caucasian kid, no matter what color you are, the justice system is not fair. He's known to have done something very heinous against that woman, and they're telling that woman what he did to you is only worthy of 6 months. But they're talking about life in prison for Bill Cosby if he's convicted, and we know Mike Tyson spent 3 years. Sexual assault is wrong. We should say no every single time. Men have to stand up for women as well as women have to stand up for themselves too. But for a judge to do this is such a joke, and it's part of that same bias that Ali talked about existing in society. And outside of you, Big C, I've heard Charles Barkley talk about it today. I think I applaud him, and I applaud more men like us, because even as we talk about the NFL football season kicking off, Brock Osweiler pushed a woman down in Texas twice. It was caught on TV, and they said he was trying to defend his wife. A 6'7", 230-pound quarterback assaulted a woman, and they made it seem like it's her fault. So I know people want to make excuses for people, especially for the Caucasian athletes, but I just think that's egregious, and so much to say something against it. And before we go to the next segment,
we go back before you go into that.
Yeah.
We go back to the incident that happened at Lake Tahoe with an all-pro NFL quarterback about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Then he turned around 11 months later down in the city of Atlanta in a bar. It did the same incident to a woman again.
Yeah.
And there was never any sanctions against him, never a suspension. They just said, well, it's alleged. So women, when it comes to white men in America, have no stance.
Right.
You know, they basically can do as they please to you. You can take him to court, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, we'll just sweep it under the rug because he's going to be a productive member of society, and we can't let an alleged rape, hinder his future.
And see, that's something that men, and again, Ali stood up for something. And if we all sit back silently and we mourn for a week and then we go back to our own lives, because we've all lost someone that we love, but they live on in spirit within us. But we got to stand for something. And I hope that as anyone who's a woman or man, because we know what happened at Penn State, men can go through the same type of sexual assault, and they hid it for years because you can't get in front of the money machine that Penn State University is under the late, great Joe Paterno. Now, if you contrast that, and before I get to this next subject, I'm going to say that this segment is also sponsored by your Northern California BMW dealer, home of the ultimate driving machine. Go down and test drive the 1 Series, all the way up to the super luxury 600 horsepower M7, also known as the 760 Li. And when you drive it, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Now, Big C, wasn't it just at the great University of Baylor, just about 2 weeks ago, where they released their football coach, Riles, Mr. Art Riles, because he did not know what some of these boys, these athletes, were doing to girls. They're saying he should have known. It cost him his job, which was, I think he was making $6 million a year, and he should have known that some of these boys were taking advantage of women. He should have known. How could you always know? You can't know everything. But this kid at Stanford, they know they have the DNA evidence, and they're saying, well, what he did to every woman in the country, they're saying that what he did is only worthy of 6 months punishment. That's a joke. It really is, because he's a white male, and they're the least penalized in the criminal justice system. And oftentimes when they're caught for doing the same thing, whether it's drug sales or anything else, they get the slap on the wrist, where the young black kids get the probation and the criminal record and tossed in prison. And I know people are afraid to talk about it, but that's why we have the Charlton and Big C show. So I hope that we keep our young boys and girls mindful of that. You shouldn't put your hands on anybody, period. And if you do, I hope that they can speak up against it and bring in law enforcement. It's just a shame that when law enforcement got involved, they gave the boy a slap on the wrist, Big C.
Well, Charlton, we know of this one incident with him. Was this a pattern with him? That's what has not come out.
Yeah.
This may have been, but, in going to trial, they sequestered so much evidence that they can't utilize during the trial. So there may have been things in this young man's background and other women that were not brought forth in the trial, Charlton.
Yeah.
So, I have a hard time thinking that this was just a spontaneous scenario with him, that this is the only time that he had done this.
Yeah.
This is almost like one of those scenarios where you set somebody up. You get them over intoxicated, you slip some, as they call them, Mickeys in my days, back in somebody's drink, and all of a sudden she's passed out and unconscious.
Yeah.
And this is occurring to her. And so, was he conscious of what he was doing?
Of course he was.
This was a very malicious intent,
yeah.
Charlton. Was it premeditated? I got to think it was a premeditated rape, Charlton. Yeah. I don't think that all of a sudden you stumble on a girl that's unconscious and say, let me see what's going to happen here. You set this young lady up.
Yeah.
Is what you did. And then the judge
The court set her up too. The court set her up too.
The judge set her up and embarrassed her. Said, hey, your body and your mind is meaningless when it comes to this young man's life.
Yeah.
He is so much more important than you. You are technically a piece of trash. This is what the judge told her. You are a piece of trash in society compared to what this young man's potential is.
You see, I think that is so powerful, that statement. So I just hope that more women don't be silent. I mean, I've known growing up over the years, I've heard, I'll never forget, and I'll tell this story again. When I first started working in the sports business, I was at the Oakland Alameda Coliseum back in '96. They had an all-pro football player, I won't say his name, about 6'5", 300 pounds. And this guy, outside of the parking lot after the game, there were hordes of people around, and I was in the media section, and he was just yelling at this woman as if he was ready to fight another man. And it went on for about a minute. And I feel ashamed because I said nothing, along with all the other media people, because I did not want to lose my credential. And I'm ashamed of that. I should have said, hey, don't say that. Okay, maybe I would have gotten beat down. I don't know. But the point is, me and about 30 other media people said nothing, Big C. We just sat there like, well, that's a private issue. It's not a private issue. I feel ashamed that I didn't stand up.
And that's societal's whim on all of this, Charlton, when we look at it. As a matter of fact, today on the news, there was one of the most bravest and courageous mothers I've ever seen in history. There was a man who tried to kidnap her daughter out of a Dollar General store in Florida. She fought this man tooth and nail. Her 13-year-old daughter, somebody they never knew, he was trying to kidnap her daughter out of the store. She was dragging and pulling on her daughter from one direction. He was pulling and dragging and punching the mother from another direction.
Yeah.
But she fought this man off on camera. That's what society needs to do. And this mother needs to be called to the White House by President Obama and given the Medal of Honor for what she did in protecting her child. She went to all means to protect her 13-year-old daughter, Charlton. Now, this is what society needs to do to protect young women. When we talk about exploitation, the sex trade, the strip clubs, and all of these young women are children of somebody, Charlton.
Yeah.
Children. They were coveted at birth.
Yeah.
They were looked at as the greatest thing since sliced bread when they were born.
Right.
And for some reason, society has let them fall through the cracks and saying they are of no value, Charlton.
Yeah.
So until society decides that we're going to value all women in society and in the world, these type of incidents, Charlton, will continuously happen where you have a judge and say, hey, she's trash.
Yeah.
I don't care about her future. I'm more concerned about his.
Well, I think that's so important that we at least speak out against it. So again, thank you, Charles Barkley, for having the Stones to stand up and just say what's right. It's the same thing everyone talks about when we go off the air. We know you have to say the right thing to keep the audience appeased. Unless you're Donald Trump, you can say whatever you want to say. But for most people, they have a social decorum that you can't really speak your mind on TV or radio. And it's speaking of your mind, this segment is also sponsored by your Northern California Ford dealer, home of the all-new F-150. They build it Ford tough. When you go down and test drive it, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Also, Beneath His Wings Foundation, make a donation today. It's easy, it's fast and secure. Contact Cynthia Evans at CYNN Entertainment. When it comes to promotion, she's the best in Northern California. Let her know that Charlton and Big C sent you. Now, Big C, this is what I want to also bring up, because we have so much to talk about in sports, and this is about Muhammad Ali. And I know we talk sports, but we also talk about the male behavior in sports, because a lot of times athletes are the ones accused of being privileged to get away with things. But we know in society...
This young man was an athlete, wasn't he?
Yeah, but see...
He was a world-class swimmer.
Exactly.
So they were more concerned about his potential Olympic future
for the great
than he was about this young woman.
For the great Stanford University. So it happened at Stanford, which is a private university. Also Baylor, down in Great City, Texas. I believe they're also a private university.
Private university also, Charles.
And so this whole bourgeois mentality that, hey, we go to a private school, therefore we're too good for that type of behavior, that's garbage. Those guys get away with it more than people at state colleges because their daddies have the money to bail them out of jail. And when you think about that, I just want every woman to keep in mind that you gotta use your voice, just like Hillary Clinton, whether you like her or not. I'm not saying who to vote for. I've been Democrat and Republican in my life, but I just want people to have a voice so that you don't feel like we're still living in the 1930s, and everyone has a chance to speak their mind. And
so that's what Donald Trump wants, as far as to be in 1930 and 1940.
Well, if he builds that wall, I don't know if we're going to have the Olympics, because that means are Americans going to be trapped inside of that wall also, or just to keep other people out, Big C? So that's something people got to keep in mind. It works both ways. I think it's one of those doors that you can go in, but you can't come out. So maybe that's what he's talking about. But I also want to say that this final segment is sponsored by United Labor. We're the leader when it comes to guaranteed issued life insurance up to $100,000. No medical questions. Also by Goosehead Insurance. We're the leader when it comes to property and casualty. Also, I'm a life insurance broker for One Life America. We're the leader in final expense. Now, Big C, I know, and again, Charles Barkley, I tip my hat to Charles Barkley, because outside of you, Big C, I haven't heard anyone speaking up against it, against inequality, whether it's black or white, or men and women. So I appreciate that we've touched onto something that the national media has picked up on. And again, that's a credit to Ali, because he made me feel like we should speak up or get off the air.
Well, I don't see it being the national media, Charlton. I see it being Charles Barkley. Yeah. Charles Barkley was a guest. Charles Barkley, they were not going to kick off the show, but it was easy for them to use Charles Barkley and let him make the statements for that network, because he was not an employee of their network.
Yeah.
So it kept their people safe and their network safe, because this was a guest thought.
Yeah.
And they will always put that disclaimer in, Charlton.
Yeah.
The thoughts and words of our guests
yeah.
are not always a reflection of this network.
Yeah, of how they feel. And that's always going to keep them safe. So I know we have basketball going on, and we have baseball, and we have the NHL with Pittsburgh having a 3-1 lead over the San Jose Sharks. Now, Big C, we talked about penguins eating sharks. Man, they must be feeding those penguins some steroids, because they're up 3-1 over the Sharks, Big C. That might be wrapped up in one more game. But I want to touch on tonight's game in the NBA Finals. And we know LeBron James is the king of Ohio, even though he doesn't have the social status that Muhammad Ali had. He's just about 1 billion times wealthier than Muhammad Ali was. I just wish that these young men, instead of making about what type of shoe they're going to wear, they would talk about donating money to inner city schools, donating computers to inner city schools. Because if you don't reach out and reach back and help give to the youth that are being exploited, which we know is the black poor class, those are the ones who are sought after to play football and basketball and baseball. And I know we have NBA basketball coming up, and a lot of these kids, they grew up in communities that were not very well off. So I would love to see not just young athletes make a push, black and white athletes. There's a lot of poor white kids too. But put some money into Boys and Girls Clubs, put some money into computers, so people can learn math and science and not just how to shoot a jump shot, Big C. Do you see anything, if you could advise some of these young multi-millionaire and billionaire athletes how to become more like Ali, what would you say from a constructive point of view, Big C? Any thoughts on that?
From a constructive perspective, Charlton, you have to create these endowments, the scholarship opportunity, these hope funds. That's what you have to do to show these young men what they can strive to be. Not tell them about the next Madden game that they can play football on, or the next inside the NBA for their PlayStation or Xbox, Charlton. You have to enlighten them to learn how to read. All these young men can push a button playing a video game or texting.
Yeah.
But, as far as picking up a pencil or a pen or even a newspaper and learning how to articulate and pronounce, that's what they need to do. And when we talk about sports, Charlton, and these professional athletes being involved with the youth, what do we hear? Play 60, go out and get exercise.
Yeah.
What does that lead to, Charlton? Going out trying to be an athlete. We're not hearing about read for 60 minutes a day. That's not what we're getting from these athletes.
Yeah.
We're talking about go out and exercise for 20 minutes so you have an opportunity to be a better athlete. I would rather see someone with a strong mind than a set of strong legs, Charlton.
Wow.
Because then I don't fear him later on in life, because he can rationalize with situations instead of being frustrated in situations, Charlton.
Yeah, and see, that's so important and I think you're going to see this push because unfortunately, Muhammad Ali had to pass before more people talk about it. I know we've talked about it over the years about what's it going to take for young African-American boys to feel they have the same opportunities in life outside of the sports arena. We know that when you're young, and this is for the mothers and the fathers out there listening, black and white, as a young African-American boy, you are chosen and sought out by college coaches to help come to their university. They want to make you
on a pedestal, Charles.
On a pedestal, make you bigger, stronger, and faster, so you could be the next Michael Jordan. You could be the next great athlete. And it's a farce because it's not going to happen for about 99% of the people.
Well, Charlton, it comes back to lack of education. When these young men don't have an education, they'll fall for the smoke and mirror act, and that's what's given out. The smoke and mirror. Come on in, play for a year or two with us. Let's go ahead on off and make your $100 million contract with the NBA or the NFL.
Well,
this is what's sold to them. And so all of a sudden, Charlton, you go to college.
Yeah.
You leave after a year or two. You don't get drafted. Next thing you know, you're laboring for a decade or more in the Continental League, European leagues, all of this. You don't make the NBA.
Yeah.
This is what these young men don't understand. They can't even do basic math, Charlton. That's the problem with these college athletes. They cannot do basic math. You got 2 rounds to the NBA draft, Charlton. You have how many teams? 30 teams in the NBA?
Yeah.
You have 125, Charlton, Division I colleges. 125. So when you put the pure numbers together, Charlton, and then you also, every year, you have at least 20 players coming out of high school trying to enter the NBA draft, who now have no chance at college education because they've given up their eligibility because some agent walked in and said, hey, here's $100,000, go buy yourself an Escalade, some jewelry, and we'll be ready for the draft. And they end up not being drafted, so he's in debt to his agent forever.
Well,
but we also got to bring the European players, Charlton, into the equation. We're 17. 17 in last year's draft was drafted. So if you have 17 European players drafted, Charlton, that 30, not 30, but 60 in total. Now it's been reduced down to what? 43 Americans? 43? So 43 Americans out of 125 universities and 20 high schools had an opportunity to be drafted. Only 43. So somebody is not educating these young men, regardless of how great you are, and that's the only thing they tell them is how great their athletic paralysis is. They don't tell them that they're an intelligent man.
Well, see,
and that's that's what they lack the most.
I think that's very true, BC. So as people watch this game tonight, and again, I love sports, and when you love something, you try to make it better. I just want people to have the social consciousness the way Muhammad Ali had. What are we teaching young kids? Go out and buy my shoes, or go out and try to get an education and become something of you, make something of yourself, and speak out against injustice. We know that money drives everything. It's never about black and white. It's about green. How much money do you have to function in society? And no matter what color you are, what gender you are, we all need it. And I'll say this before we close, Big C. We have the great Jim Harbaugh out of Michigan, a great university in the Big Ten, and also Nick Saban, who runs, I guess, the state of Alabama
Well, he runs the SEC right now.
Runs the SEC.
He's basically the governor of the SEC.
Okay, he's the grandfather, or what they call the godfather of the SEC. And we know Alabama's going to get beaten by USC in the kickoff classic because Lynn Swann came back.
Beaten out of the locker room.
He came back just for that game, Big C. So Lynn Swann, he's pressing weights too, trying to get bigger and stronger, Big C. But
well, I got to go look at the SEC's record over the last 5 years and
it doesn't matter. They got back Lynn Swann, so he's going to straighten things out. The other boys are going to find out, come down to that kickoff classic. But just keep this in mind. Harbaugh and Saban are running around talking about who can recruit whom and in whose territory. Mostly looking at inner city kids. They're not talking about how many computers they can help supply for those inner city neighborhoods. So I want you guys to keep that in mind as we talk about how great these coaches are. And also, speaking of great, Big C, we are out of time, but you can listen to us every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide on Charlton and Big C Sports. We bring it to you real sports talk, and we want you to know, enjoy life, but also be like Ali, stand up for something. And you can do it by listening to Charlton and Big C Sports. So we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.